quick question to you all before we get started. Who uses comms within their industry, their offices, for harnessing the power of comms in an emergency? What do you use it for, sir? Security, okay. It's a really, really good method. So we're going to talk about harnessing the power of comms in an emergency, because when it comes to a flight or fight situation, it's really important to get those comms out and distributed quickly, efficiently, to lots of different types of people. So I come from a company called SCG, and we're here on our stand via SCG Together. I'm a comms specialist, and my background was working in schools before I started working in the comms industry. I did safeguarding strategic lead, SEN officer, and also helping schools to be better enabled to plan with emergency preparedness, with things like lockdown and evacuation methods. So we kind of started with a webinar, and we invited lots of different people from different types of businesses, sectors, education, and we said, how do you practice an event when an emergency happens? A few blank looks, and a few people said, well, we've got children who might be on care plans. Therefore, we need to have paging and emergencies distributed through handset speakers. We can do this. We need to have a different lockdown sound than an evacuation. We can also do that via security alerts. Then we started to speak to industry specialists in different areas, and they started to flag key points like people who might have SEND or experienced trauma before, and how they can actually respond in an emergency as well. I worked with a lady called Lisa Broad, and as you can see on the screen, she said, what we have to remember is Martin's Law is one enabler of a strategy that already exists. Schools and businesses should already have effective lockdown plans in place. They should already be considering the risk from terrorism, but unfortunately, the support and guidance has not always been there from the government, and Martin's Law will help to mandate this. The main thing is, law or not, it should be happening now, which is why taking action is really important. So planning ahead. In terms of actual emergency planning and what they're going to expect and how to mitigate risk, you can do really, really simple things. And that's the key thing for me. It's thinking about the level of cost, if we can get funding into schools and councils to help support them with new systems. You'll hear from somebody later on today about first aid, also how to manage risk, and different things you can think about from a security perspective. So as it says here, in most cases, there'll be low or no cost for any changes to implement. What does this look like for your setting? So settings, as it says, should have plans in place to respond effectively to different types of incidents when they occur. If an incident does arrive, staff should draw on their knowledge and plans. And quite often when what I find, which one of my slides I'll come into in a minute, is bad practices. So it will look great on paper, but when it comes to physically practicing it, that's when it falls down. And I'll show you a couple of those key examples in a moment. They should consistently test their plans, and they are suitable for live testing, such as practice drills and considerations, as I was mentioning earlier, around individuals who've had trauma before, people who might be sensory-led, individuals who might be hard of hearing. So we have to think about different ways to communicate. What types of requests have we received in as a business? So we received a really interesting request in about a year ago from a college in Manchester. And they said to us, how can we help tackle our business continuity plan and our emergency preparedness, which are two really key ISOs? And we said, well, that's a really, really good question. How are we going to do this? And they said, we need to have speakers in car parks. We need to have visual alerters for environments where we've got animals. And naturally, they didn't want sound speakers where there were animals in their horticultural village, because there would have been a stampede. So we think about visual alerts in terms of things that people can read on screens versus lights that can flash up as well. We have quite a few customers who use different lights for different types of scenarios. So whether it might be a fire, lockdown, or a medical emergency, they will have different colors, which the staff can relate to. So when there's a plan and the staff are able to map it out, they can think about those different things for different people. So they said, we're looking at amending and improving our business continuity plan. They were thinking about their emergency evacuation, their procedures, how they communicate to all their staff within that building. And the key thing for me at the bottom was Martin's Law compliancy. And a lot of our staff at the time within our business said, what on earth does that mean? What is Martin's Law? And when you think about it in practical terms, it comes down to managing risk against counter-terrorism. But there's a whole other bigger scope at play here, because every single business within the UK, or every single public entity, every single school, should already have in place evacuation and lockdown methods. So preparing for this and being compliant. As I was referring to two ISOs earlier, there's the one for greater emphasis on recovery phase, and then there's one which deals with business continuity. So that's emergency preparedness and BCPs. There's a lady here today, Jodie, who introduced me. So if you need to talk about how to make this as an effective plan within your business, I would go and talk to her, or this chap at the front, Andy, as well. Hello again. Both of these incorporate the need for legal compliance and help yourself and staff be better prepared in the event of an emergency. So in terms of how you communicate this in an emergency, we're adopting 3 different things, which is guide, shelter, and communicate. When you're guiding people to a safe space, it needs to be actioned and detailed in a specific manner. It might be, as I mentioned earlier, great on paper, but are you regularly practicing it? And do these people know what to do, how to react, and the process of delivering this effectively in an emergency? If you have to shelter somebody for several hours, what does that mean? Is it a lockdown event? Is it an evacuation? 2 very similar words, but lockdown is locking down your space. So that's doors, windows, those key areas, physical items, and then evacuation is actually people. And it's a concept that schools came up with, because that word, believe it or not, doesn't exist in the English dictionary. So evacuation is really key, and thinking about how people will react. And we've seen it in a lot more schools recently, that they're actually challenging the narrative, and they're not just doing emergency plan drills for evacuation and fire, they're doing them quite frequently for lockdown events, which is really, really great to see. And then the way in which this is communicated is a really, really key point as well. So as I mentioned earlier, it's thinking about how those things happen and how you actually action this plan as well. So with telephony, there's a couple of really easy ways to do it. You can either have a code which is distributed, and then there's an alarm which goes out with a person's voice. You might have a button which you want somebody to hit in terms of an emergency, so they don't have to think about what's coming next. Or they might have a simple message which says, welcome to your emergency plan. Press 1 to initiate your lockdown, press 2 to initiate your evacuation, and press 3 to broadcast your own message. We also have to think about different areas where these key messages are distributed to. If you have a big site, i.e. a college, like we dealt with Manchester, they're going to have different zones where you have to play different sounds and different messages to bring people into different places. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is actually one of my favourite slides, because schools along the years have helped me collate a lot of these. Examples of bad practices. Have we seen a few of these? Or maybe done a few? Yeah? Let's be honest. I've seen a couple when I worked in schools. So communicating via whistles. Pretty old hat. Isn't effective. Cardboard cutouts. I spoke to a lovely lady, we'll call her Karen. Spoke to a lovely lady in a school. It was a big secondary school, and they had 60 classrooms. She turned around to me and she said, our plan at the moment, and she picked up this cardboard cutout, lockdown in effect, it said on it. I said, what do you do in an emergency then, Karen? And she said, well, it's my job to walk up and down to each classroom with this cardboard cutout. I said, do you think that's an effective plan? She said, no, Alice, I've got a gammy leg. There's no way I'm going to get to all of these classrooms without falling over and hurting myself. And the attacker's already come in and done the job. So it's really ineffective, and can you help us? Emailing when there's an emergency? That's quite a common one, unfortunately. Type of alerts insufficient to meet the needs, and there's no way of providing evidence. So when the regulatory body is having a look at establishments, places of work, education's naturally going to be offset, let's face it. They're going to say, show me how you're practicing this. And they're going to say one of 2 things. Yeah, sure, I'll show you on paper. I'll show you my detailed plan, step by step. And we'll say, can you initiate that plan for me? We can, or we can't. When it comes to logging it, it's really, really simple to do. You can literally look at timestamp, dated, the person that enabled it, and whether it's a practice drill or whether it's a live event. This is an example of potentially how it would work. I have tested earlier, so the audio should play through, and we should be able to hear a live and method response and what it looks like.
Do you have strict emergency plans in place for evacuation, evacuation, or lockdown procedures?
Are staff trained in operating these plans? Do you run practice drills or exercises to rehearse these plans?
Do you have a dedicated solution in place?
Now you can ensure that all members of the public are safe on your premises with our tannoy transmitter, the ultimate solution for VoIP environments.
This device offers not just communication, but tailored instruction for every part of your facility.
Operate seamlessly by dialing an extension number, entering an optional PIN for secure access, and deliver area-specific instructions for evacuations and lockdowns.
To ensure the correct instruction is given in the right area, you can broadcast different messages out of speakers in various parts of the building, all at the same time.
This is an evacuation. Please exit through the main library entrance and make your way to the field. Please exit via the back entrance located next to the sports hall and make your way to the field.
Select from 9 pre-recorded announcements, versatile enough to guide personnel during evacuations and lockdowns.
Enhance security by connecting VoIP speakers to maglock doors, providing a comprehensive lockdown solution with area-specific control.
Cancel broadcasts easily with a call, selecting the option to end the message and swiftly return to regular operations.
You can have music play in the background of events or to signal the change of class lessons.
Experience the power of adaptable communication with our tannoy transmitter, where every message is delivered precisely where and when it's needed.
Thank you, Ben and Ella. I work with Ben and Ella on a daily basis, so they're not actors. So this is an example of how a communications platform might work. It tells you how it might be initiated with an emergency accessory, whether that be a button or a dongle around the neck. A Yealink or Cisco device. Technically, it will work on any SIP technology platform, which is really, really key for those who want to utilize what they already have in place. Then with the little paging device in the middle, this enables us to actually distribute it through big speakers, the visual sound alerts, and the alerters through any platform. So questions and what you should consider moving forwards. What questions should be asking your business, your school, public? Do you have evacuation plans, lockdown procedures in place? Are staff trained in operating these plans? Do you run practice drills? Do you have regular exercises and rehearse these to make sure everybody's confident? What's the new process like? So when you actually adopt a new staff member, are they walked through that process? Are they confident? Do they have any questions? Do you have a dedicated solution in place? Are you compliant? And then additional considerations, as I've been talking about through this presentation, dedicated sounds, messages, different activation methods, and also visual alerters. Any questions? Fab, well, thank you all very, very much. And I'm going to drop the mic. I'm joking, I'm not.